Hey guys, welcome to Nuno Solutions. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can upload a file directly from JavaScript to a C# web API. We're going to use a div element as the drop zone. So that what that means is in the web browser, we're going to have a div element where we're going to, when you drag the file over the div element, it's going to handle the events to accept that file and post that file to the C# web API. It's going to subscribe to 3 different JavaScript events: drag over, drag leave, and drop. This is kind of what it'll look like. We'll have a div element. It'll have a class called drop zone because we're going to be adding some hovering effects when you move your mouse over the hovering. This is what it looks like, by the way, what it's going to look like on the web page. When you hover your mouse over it, it's going to, I just want to change the color of it so you could tell that you're hovering over it. The other thing is we have to handle the drag over and drag leave because the browsers have things that they do when you drag files over your web page. Like, for example, Chrome will open up a brand new tab if you drag an image, and it'll just show you the image. If it's a PDF, it'll open up the PDF. So what we're going to do in the drag over and drag leave events, we're going to use this JavaScript event.prevent default to prevent the default thing from happening in the web browser. In the drag over event, one of the things we're going to be doing is adding a hover class because the default hover CSS style that we set doesn't work. When you're actually grab a file with your mouse and you're dragging it over an element, it doesn't trigger the hover that's out of the box when you write the code in CSS. So we're actually, if you look here, I have the colon hover, which is what happens when you just put your mouse over when you're not dragging anything. But when you're dragging an item over an element, this doesn't actually trigger. So I actually added it again here as with a dot hover. So it's a custom, drop zone hover class. And we're literally going to be adding the hover, and on leave, we're going to remove the hover class, and on over, we're going to add it, and it's going to just kind of look the same. This is just the drag leave, and here we're going to remove the hover, as I just said. You can see it right here. We're going to use event.target.classlist.remove, and we're going to remove the hover class. And you can see here, if you look at this JavaScript side here, we're going to do the same thing here, event.target.classlist.add. And you notice here the first line I'm doing an event.prevent default, and the reason why is because you have to do it here. If you don't do it here, it'll open up the new tab and show the image in new tab, and your drag and drop events won't work. So the last event that we have to do is the on drop. This is the one where we're going to actually construct our form data object, attach the file, and any other information we want. Like if we had like employee information or whatever it is, I don't know, maybe you're building an employee application and you're adding a new employee, and you're dragging and dropping the employee's photo onto your form, and you want to send additional information like the employee's name, employee's phone number, whatever. You could attach other information other than the file to your form data object and post everything all at once to the C# web API. I'm going to actually post the data using fetch, but you could use Axios. If you're using Angular, you could use the Angular injected HTTP service, whatever. If you're using React, every library has their own, so no problem. But just for simplicity, because I'm doing this with plain JavaScript, I'm going to use fetch. Of course, fetch, as you know, does not work on Internet Explorer if for some reason you're still using that browser, but any modern browser supports it. So then we're going to create a file bundle helper class. This file bundle helper class is going to have a method called save as. It's going to take a parameter called file path. And that's just a helper class method that we're going to create to be able to save the file directly to my computer. It's going to have a couple properties: return code and return message. If for some reason saving the file creates an exception, we're capturing that exception. We're going to return a return code, which is an integer of -1, and a return message of whatever the error is. File name is going to contain the file name that's posted, and posted file is going to contain an iForm file. It's in .NET Core. That's how the file gets posted, and that's how you can access its properties. And then we'll finish off by actually creating an upload controller. It's going to be a web API controller, and it's going to contain a single post method called upload. The method name will be upload image. It will not have any parameters because we're going to pull all the information from the request.form. Everything is going to be in there that we need, and you can see here we're going to use the file bundle. We're going to pass into when we construct the file bundle, we're going to pass in the HTTP request. All right, so that's the end of that. So let's start coding. Let's go into Visual Studio, create a brand new project. Select ASP.NET Core Web App, click Next. Give it a name. I'm just going to do Nuno Solutions image upload.youtube. Click Next. And I'm going to use .NET 6. Feel free to use .NET 7. It should work the same. I haven't tested it, but it really should work the same. All right. And I'm going to run the application just to make sure that it compiles, make sure that the template in Visual Studio works. It should work. But I've actually I do this every single time because I've actually had it not work in the past, which you think is impossible, but believe me, it's happened. All right, so this is what you get. This is just the out-of-the-box ASP.NET Core web app web page. This is the index.chtml. So let's go into Solution Explorer, expand pages, and open up the index.chtml. Delete lines 7 through 10. We don't need that. So now at this point, we're going to start adding some code. So the first thing we got to add is the style. Of course, this should be in the style sheet. I'm just going to do everything inside my index.chtml just for simplicity's sake. We're going to add a drop zone style that we're going to be using on our div. So I'm actually going to copy a little bit of code from my other screen here. So we're going to have a drop zone. This styling right here is what's going to make the drop zone kind of look like this. This right here is that hovering, same class, but it's to handle the hover. And over here, this part right here is the dot hover class. We're going to be toggling back and forth on the drag leave and drag over JavaScript events. Okay, so you could actually scroll down a little bit here. Next thing we're going to do, so just to demonstrate the capability to add additional properties to your form data when that's posted to your web API that we're going to be creating. I'm going to actually add an input control here. It's going to be an input text control that will allow us to change the file name so that when we drag and drop the image on the drop zone and it uploads it to the web API will be able to access a field that's called custom file name to be able to save that image on the server, right, with whatever file name we want. So it's very basic. It's just an input tag. I'm giving it an ID of custom file name. It's a type text, so it's going to be a text box. I'm using form control bootstrap just to make it look a little bit better, and I have a placeholder just so that called custom file name, just so that it's easy to know what to put in there. Now next, let's add the actual drop zone. This is also a div element with a class name of drop zone so that it'll have the hovering effects. And this is going to subscribe to the three events that we were talking about, the on drag over, on drag leave, and on drop. I'm giving it a default title, so when you put your mouse over it, it can show tooltip. And I'm also adding a drag and drop image here text. Let's run this. I'll just show you what it looks like at this point. So this is what it looks like. We have the hovering effect working. We have a custom file name to input box. That's really what we want. Let me just show you the default functionality. When you drag and drop this over here, you see it opens up a new tab and it shows you the image. If you don't prevent the default, the browser won't handle the events properly. So you want to make sure you do an event.prevent default. Now let's create a script section here. And here is where we're going to put the three events. Real quick, when I run this, I just want to show that when I actually drag over this Mario image to right now, like if I'm not dragging anything, you see the hovering effect working. But if I drag this image over here, you see the hover effect is not actually working. So to take care of this and solve this problem, we're going to add two JavaScript events, to handle the drag over and drag leave. It's going to be two functions. First thing we're going to do in the drag over, you have to do event.prevent default, because if you don't and then you drop the image, it opens it up in a new tab. And then we're going to be adding, if you see here, event.target.classlist.add hover. So we're adding the hover class to the target element. The target element, right, when this gets triggered is our div, our drop zone div. And so the event.target gives us an instance of that element so we could access its class list. We add and remove. So on drag over, we're going to add the hover class. On drag leave, we're going to remove the hover class. So let me run this. I'll show you this actually working. Again, so if I drag this Mario, you'll see now when I enter it, the hover effect turns on, and when I move the mouse out of it, when I drag leave, because right now I'm dragging something, right? I'm dragging the image. It removes the hover class and removes the hovering effect. So the next part is we're going to handle the image drop to handle the on drop event. And so let me explain what this does. So, okay, so you have to do event.prevent default in here, and you have to do it in the drop event, and you have to do event.prevent default in the drag over. If you don't, for some reason, in those two, it does whatever the default is. You don't have to put it in the drag leave. That doesn't really have any effect. That won't do anything. But when I actually drop the image in my drop zone, I want to remove the hover effect. So it looks kind of like when I let go, it looks like to the user like you're dropping it. You'll notice that each of these functions has a parameter called event passed into it. The event just gives you event information. Obviously, since the on drag over, on drag leave, and on drop are JavaScript events, they give us a parameter called event, as you can see here. And so you can access certain things. Like one of those things is the data transfer.files. If any files are uploaded, because this is a drop event, it assumes that if you're dropping something, you're probably transferring a file to whatever that is. So in the drop zone is our div. So I'm only going to be working with one file. So that's why I'm pulling index 0 from this array. And I'm basically defining this file variable so I can have access to the file that's dropped. Then the next thing is I'm actually using a document.getElement by ID to get access to our custom file name text box or input text control. If it contains a value, then we're going to use it. But if it does not contain a value, then we're going to set the value of the input to whatever the file name is of the file that's dropped into our div. So the next step here, we're actually creating a form data object. This is what I was talking about before. To post files, you can't just use JSON. You have to post form data. So it's different. We actually construct an object called form data. This gives you a new instance, and we're going to be appending things to this form. So the first thing we're going to append is the file. I'm attaching the file, which is declared up here, to that file key. And then I'm doing an append. I'm appending the custom file name and then pulling that from our input text box. So when I post this form data it is received by the web API, and from the web API, we should be able to access the form data doing this.request.form. And then that'll be an array as well of things we can access. And now I have this commented out here, but you may need to set this if you're using Angular or one of those other third-party libraries where they default to JSON as a content type, but you don't have to do it when you're using the fetch in plain old JavaScript. So what I'm doing here is I'm posting to this URL. This is going to be a relative post, whatever my base URL is, plus this, that's where it'll be posted to. We're using a method post, and we're posting our form data in the body of the request. Then when this request completes, it'll return a promise. We'll return response.json. This gives us an object, and then we use another .then. So this data is going to be that JSON object created into a JavaScript object, and then we could actually access like data.return code, data.return message, and I'll show that. That's going to be those are going to be the properties that we add to our file bundle class. You may notice though that these properties are not Pascal case, they're camel case. That happens automatically with I believe it's the C# Web API and .NET Core. There is a way to change that if you want in the program.cs, the startup, but by default when it returns data, it'll camel case your properties. And then here we're just catching the error if any error occurs and logging it to the console. All right, so the next step, we added the div, we added the JavaScript elements, and now we're going to create the API controller. So let's do this. Let's create an API folder. Right-click your project, add new folder, and now right-click your API folder, add, and then do new item. In the search box at the top, just type in API, and you're going to select API controller -empty. Make sure you change the name to upload controller. Click add. All right, now we have an API controller, and we have to add another thing, which we'll do. Let's add a models folder. Right click your project, click add new folder, models, and in a little bit we'll create a file bundle class in this models folder. But first, let's implement our method to handle processing messages that are sent. So to do this, I'm actually gonna copy and paste some pre-created code. This is a public method. It's going to return a file bundle class. The name of this method is called upload image. The route for this method is image. So really, it's going to be API. This is going to be upload. So it's going to be API/upload/image. It'll be like this: API/upload/image. This controller here gets replaced with the controller name minus this controller. It's just a convention. So that's why in the JavaScript code, this API/upload/image, you will see it. That's the URL where we're posting the form data to. That'll tell ASP.NET, the router, to redirect that post directly to the upload image method. Scroll down. So we're instantiating a file bundle, passing in a request object. Again, this is coming from this.request, and you'll see that this is an HTTP request class. This is so that we can, within our file bundle, I'll explain this in a little bit, so that we can actually fetch the form data. Once we create the file bundle, we're using the file bundle.saveas to save the file to this path, which is running on my computer. If it's successful, we're going to set the return message on the file bundle to this message here. Let me collapse the Solution Explorer so you can see the code a little easier. And then we're finally returning the file bundle, which is the expected return type. Okay, let's create the file bundle now. It'll make more sense once that's done. Let's right-click the models, click add, and you could do class, and then type in file bundle. press enter. Now we have a file bundle class in here, and I'm actually going to pull some of this code from my other screen here, and I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, and I'm going to explain what this does. So first of all, we have a file bundle constructor that accepts an HTTP request parameter, and we're setting this.request to request. This request right here is just a private variable that we have so we could have access to the HTTP request. So I'm going to collapse I'm using a region here. You can see I'm using a region so I could collapse the constructor. We have a return code, which is an integer. We have a return message, which is a string. Again, if you remember in our JavaScript, we're reading the return code and return message from our data, which is returned from calling fetch. That's exactly what this is, except obviously it's returning it in camel case, but don't worry about that for now. Now we also have a file name property. This property though is going to check if the request.form.custom file name, if it's not empty, then we're going to use that as the file name. If it is empty, we're going to use the posted file name. Posted file is just another property in here that is of type iForm file. This is actually the form file that you could technically access this using request.form.files and you pull it in using the index 0, but I just did it for easy access so I don't have to keep on typing request.form.files. It's just a lot to type. I created a property called posted file, and I'm literally, if the request.form.files.count is greater than 0, I just return the first file. Otherwise, I'm returning null. And then we have a method called save as. It requires a string that's a file path. So this is whatever the file path we want to save our image to. And it checks if the posted file is null, then just return. That means there's nothing to save. But if the posted file is valid, then we're going to create a file stream using the file path, the target destination file path where we want to save the image. And we're going to call posted file.openReadStream to get a file stream, and then we're going to copy the stream from the posted file to the file stream we created, or the target file stream. As you can see, this right here creates a file stream to the location where we want to save the image, and we're just taking the posted file and copying it to that file stream, and then we're closing the file stream. All that will do is take the image from memory and save it to the disk. Save this and go back into our upload controller, and you see we have these little squiggly lines, but if you press Control period, you'll see that this opens up. It wants to add a using. That's because the namespace, if you go into this file bundler, the namespace is nunasolutions.imageupload.yt.models. You could technically, if you want to fix it, just delete the .models, and now if you come in here, you see now it's good. Or if you want, you could just add this namespace to the top here manually, like this. Right, and you see if it fixes it. Or another way to do it is you put your mouse over this, and then you put your cursor over it. This little thing will pop up. This little click on it, and it'll add it for you automatically. So at this point, let's save everything. Let's make sure that it builds, and if everything builds and it's successful, we should be able to run this. Okay, so now let's test it out. I'm gonna pull up my temp directory, which is here. You can see I don't have anything in it. I just kind of put it like this so you can see it, right? I'm going to take the plan is I'm going to drag this Mario image or JPEG into our drop zone. Let me just reduce this like that. So we're going to drag this into our drop zone. You see that it actually set this properly, but for some reason it didn't work. You see it didn't save the file. Let's hit F12 and see what's going on. Okay, so it cannot find our API. It's like it doesn't know where it is. This is because we haven't mapped routes in our program class yet. So if you open up our program C# class, scroll down to the bottom, and right here, right before the app.run, you're gonna want to call app.mapControllerRoute like this. Name a default and use this pattern. Save this. You could Google this, by the way, if you just Google app.mapControllerRoute, or just type it in if you want to type it in. And now if you run it, all this does is it makes it so that API controllers will work. Like they'll route properly to the correct controller. So let's go ahead, and you see there's no file in the temp folder. I'm going to drag Mario image directly into our drop zone. And it said we got an alert message box saying Mario JPG uploaded successfully. If I go to the temp folder, you see now we have a Mario GPT in our temp. If I open that up, it opened up on my other screen here. You'll see that it actually saved the image and you could open it without a problem. And it works perfectly. So the alert message that we received actually, if we go into our index.html, I didn't explain that before. If the return code, we return the file in the API controller, we're returning a file bundle. If it's successful, it's just returning a message, but by default, return code is going to be 0. So in the JavaScript, we're doing if the data.return code is 0, that means it was successful. We're just going to show the message. Otherwise, if it's not 0, if it's negative or whatever, that means that some kind of error occurred, and we're going to still show the error, the return message, but we're going to append it with an error. And that's all it does, guys. That's it for this video. I hope you guys learned something. I'm gonna create a zip of this project and place it on my website so you can download it. If you want to download it, you can download it from nunasolutions.com. The video will be posted there as well. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Please don't forget to subscribe and also give a thumbs up. That actually helps me out a lot, so I appreciate it. All right, guys, take care. Bye.